Everyone wants their abs as peeled as possible, and we all know they're made in the kitchen. But we can target those superficial layers so that even when we're a little husky, they still show through. On top of that, up until recently, I would have taken a literal on an isometric exercise like this one. But after injuring my back, picking up my handicapped dog, I completely changed the way I train all my core muscles. I ended up going through all the major muscles of the core, everything from the QL to the psoas to the transversus abdominis, and I figured out the optimal progression from stupid exercises that you only really do when you're hurt to true ass kickers that allow us to strengthen the muscles that we often neglect. So today, not only are we going over how to get those aesthetically pleasing abs, but we're gonna also go over how to strengthen those core muscles so you never injure yourself again. Unless you break your neck trying to blow yourself, but that at least is a worthy endeavor. Now, some people will argue that all your core really needs are compound exercises that require abdominal bracing while you're loading the spine. And this is something I personally bought into for a long time. But the problem is that only really covers the sagittal plane. And most of the time when you injure yourself to the point it feels like your spine's poking out like a turtle head, it's usually because you're reaching down, twisting in the transverse plane, or you're lifting something up and slightly off in the frontal plane. On top of the fact that a lot of these muscles can be strengthened a lot faster just by programming exercises that actually target them. Also, if bracing was all you really needed, then all of the 2 a.m. violent Taco Bell shits you've taken over your life would have made your back unbreakable by now. It has not. Maybe your O-ring is, but not your... When it comes to training your rectus abdominis, the six-pack, nothing beats dynamic flexion and extension movements, which have been proven safe for anyone without a pre-existing disc injury. Bulge, herniation, rupture, smushed. I'd also argue that even if you have any of those and you want to grow your rectus abdominis, your goal should be to build up to a point you can do movements of flexion with limited extension. Almost think of it like flexion and then a controlled return from flexion. And I'm sure even hearing that makes your butthole pucker. But the important thing to understand is that even though the disc herniation is what ruined your life, long-term low back pain and chronically re-injuring it is more related to decreases in cross-sectional area of one or both stabilizing muscles like the multifidus and loss of neuromuscular control. It's the reason that you could be doing fine and then all of a sudden one day you sneeze and almost die. I never know what to do with my hands. So by regaining the CSA, neuromuscular control, and strengthening those muscles, the herniation will still be there, but you'll be able to regain function and do things that you didn't even think possible. There have been people that have gone from full herniation, can't move, hate their life, to deadlifting again. Not saying that should be your goal, but it should give you some hope. That way you don't just one day walk into traffic. Now the question is, can you target your upper versus your lower abs, even though the rectus abdominis is just one long muscle with segmented muscle bellies? And the answer is probably. Because they've seen this in high-level tennis players where they end up with more regional hypertrophy in the distal end of their non-dominant side, which sounds weird, but when they serve, they stretch back, contract into it. It makes sense. And yes, fuck you, I'm left-handed. So it makes sense to program an upper and lower abs exercise. The rectus abdominis actually has a very limited range of motion. Most people don't realize this and opt for full sit-ups, which actually target more external obliques than anything else, so you missed. If we want to target the upper abs more, we need to keep the pelvis stationary and tilt the thorax more. If we want to hit the lower abs, thorax stays stationary, pelvis tilts. You look like a real creep. That means an exercise like the cable crunch is a great option for targeting those upper abs, but not the way that most people do it. Like I said before, the rectus abdominis has a very limited range of motion. So when you see people crunch all the way down to the point they're staring at their own starfish, that means they either brought in help from hip flexion, which now we're targeting lower abs as well, or their obliques. So what's actually happening is you're going from a dynamic contraction into an isometric hold. And again, isometrics aren't bad, but in terms of hypertrophy, dynamic contractions are always better. So instead of spending 3/4 of the movement just bracing, shorten the range of motion and focus on slight flexion and extension. My favorite progression is a modified reverse sit-up, because as much as I love cable crunches, sometimes the stacks just suck and you can do the entire thing for 30 reps, which again, hypertrophy will happen at 30 reps, but why not find an exercise that kicks your ass so much you can barely get 10? For me, that's this one. The key here is to limit any pelvic movement, keeping those hips flexed at 90, driving the contraction and the flexion to happen right at those upper abs, which makes it a lot safer for anybody that has a pre-existing lumbar injury, because I've seen people... Oh no. When it comes to lower abs, it really just depends on how screwed up you are, because if you're Mr. Glass, then you're going to want to stick to a seemingly boring and stupid exercise like toe touches. It allows you to maintain a connection between your back and the floor so nothing bad happens. And even if you're not injured, you do enough of them, it doesn't feel great. And since our goal when targeting those lower abs is that dry humping pelvis movement, the most optimal exercise is a back-supported hanging leg raise. And the key here is to focus on exaggerating that posterior pelvic tilt. I'd also add control the negative, because now we're getting into more dangerous movements for some people, so you might want to get your mom to sign your permission slip. Now let's get into some of the more neglected core muscles. One of those being the iliosoaz group, which is made up of the psoas and iliacus, and problems with these can present themselves in several ways. Anterior pelvic tilt is often linked to these muscles being chronically shortened, or if you have trouble getting into a deep squat, these are the two hip flexors that have the largest hip flexion moment arm past 90 degrees. So if you feel like you put that bar on your back and you can't get down all the way unless you put 2 plates on there, this could be why. There's no real progression here, there's just one exercise that rules them all. It's a psoas sit-up where you position yourself on the edge of the bench, throw your foot under a heavy-ass dumbbell, grab the opposite knee, and slowly stretch further and further back. The deepest muscle that almost knocked me out is the quadratus lumborum, the QL. As I went to pick up Chuck, I was slightly tilted and it was awful. It's one that I'll never neglect again because it's actually very simple and easy to target. You can either start your workouts with an exercise like these butt walks, walking forward and backwards, or the more advanced version on the hyperextension, where you split your stance and that lead leg is the one on your working side. 2 quick notes. First, make sure all the movement isn't coming from your upper back. We're not training obliques, so I like to think about it as lengthening at the hip. The second thing is I want you to progress slowly. I'd rather you focus on getting more depth in a controlled manner with no weight than trying to overload this movement. Eventually you can work up to holding some weight, but we're not there yet. Speaking of obliques, I know a lot of people don't like to train them because they don't want a thicker waist. And the truth is, yeah, that's gonna happen. Even isometric holds, which have been shown to induce an insignificant amount of hypertrophy in the external obliques, absolutely induce hypertrophy in a significant way in the internal oblique and transversus abdominis. So, too bad? My 2 cents, if you neglect or avoid those lateral abdominal muscles, it'll eventually lead to injury. They call them the core muscles for a reason, because they all depend on one another to function properly, so if one sucks, your life sucks. And honestly, I just don't give a shit. I'm gonna get it as thick and strong as possible. A good beginner exercise is throwing something between your legs, squeezing the shit out of it, engaging your core, bracing those abdominals, lifting those shoulders slightly off the ground, and then taking turns reaching a little bit higher with each hand, creating a slight twist each time. The advanced progression for this one is really any twisting movement you want to pull out of your ass, because as bodybuilders, we never work in the transverse plane, so anything you do is gonna be hard. My go-to is a little weird, but it'll make sense after you try it. You're gonna grab the cable and cut the movement in half. This will force you to control it, but also allow you to progressively overload and get stronger fast. As you twist, you're gonna feel those lateral abdominal wall muscles working, but just as important, you're gonna feel that multifidus on the opposite side engage, and it will feel weird, awkward, violating, but good, because it's a muscle that you probably have never trained. Here's the complete workout, sets, reps. There is no rest time, but abs are a little bit easier. If you can only get 2 reps, you probably shouldn't have gone yet. I should mention, on the days I'm not training abs, I'll start the workout with 2 isometric exercises. The first one being banded bird dogs. Just get enough tension on that band to where you have to contract everything from your transversus abdominis to your taint. The other one is my DIY unsteady bridge, which I just throw my heels in a TRX and engage my core for 30 seconds at a time a few times. Both have been linked to decreasing low back pain. I don't currently have low back pain, but I just don't want it ever again. Never. And as always, all the programs are linked below. They're all only $20, so get after it, get growing.